Today we are doing a CanMNT stock up, stock down, where we'll be taking a look at the roster after a very successful Copa America, and we'll be seeing which players are trending up and which players are trending down. We are going to begin with the keepers, and I'm going to take a look at the three, starting with Maxime Crépeau, whose stock absolutely is through the roof right now. He had an incredible tournament, probably the keeper of the tournament, in my opinion. I had high expectations going in, just given the two friendly matches that we've seen and how good he played against France, but he was absolutely sensational. He's the keeper of the future for us right now, and I was just very, very happy with his performance. Moving on to Dane St. Clair, who got one match in Copa America against Uruguay for the third place game. I thought he was solid, but considering how well Crépeau did, it's hard to really give him a stock up, so I'm going to give Dane St. Clair the same. He's going to remain exactly where he was. And finally, the last keeper is Tom McGill, who obviously did not feature in the tournament, so he's also going to remain the same.
Yeah, now I'm going to rip through the spine of the team where there's a lot of intriguing updates. Definitely some lots of movement for Jesse Marsch to ponder. Start with the defenders. We'll go with whose stock is trending up, and there's quite a few. Heading into the tournament, there was a lot of questions of Canada's defense. How can they hold up at a high level? Turns out pretty good. Leading the way in that regard has to be Alistair Johnston. He was a rock for Canada. It's no coincidence, I find, that he gets slotted back to a right back position after playing in a back three for Canada, something a lot more similar to what he plays for Celtic. And he looked like the AJ that Celtic fans have fallen in love with over the last few years. He was tenacious, bringing everything all over the pitch. So that was huge. Otherwise, the center back pair, you compare them together because they were that good. Derek Cornelius, Moise Bombito, they really impressed together, and with their different skills. Cornelius, you can see the experience he's accumulated in Europe and, fighting for a spot on this team. Then Bombito, the new kid on the block, comes in and really impressed with just his poise, but of course, his incredible tool set. So those three definitely played a big role. Otherwise, another one is Luc de Fougerolles. For him to get a chance to start against Uruguay was a huge, moment of faith from Jesse Marsch, and de Fougerolles repaid him. It was a bit nervy early. He picked up a yellow. He was looking like he was struggling, and then he just completely let that all vanish. And I think that's the sign of a mature kid. You can let that sort of stuff impact you, or you can just focus on the next play, and he has that mentality. Meanwhile, in terms of stock holding, guys who kind of relatively stayed the same. Joel Waterman didn't see the pitch, but, he remains a part of this Canadian pool. Otherwise, Alphonso Davies, had some mixed moments this tournament. Of course, how it ended will not be the way he would have liked, but I thought also he showed some good maturity at left back. So we'll say holding. Same goes for Richie Laray. I thought he had some good moments. He remains a valuable contributor to this squad. And Kyle Hebert didn't see the field, so he remains holding. Of course, that leaves one stock down. And this one's harsh, but sometimes that's the reality of stock down. Of course, you could go down by your own, performances, by your own virtue. You can also go down when everything around you is going up, and feels like that's what happened to Kamal Miller. The fact he only played one half and then a bit of garbage time off the bench to try and close out a game, it's for someone who's been such a big part of this defense, was a surprise. And then you look at the fact that guys like Bombito, Cornelius, even de Fougerolles, all on the upswing, all potentially got moves that will help secure their future. Meanwhile, Kamal Miller, it feels like he could be a bit of an odd man out, at least in terms of the starting rotation. So tough for Kamal Miller, but that's a reality of a tournament like this. Meanwhile, moving up to the midfield, quite a few stock ups. I thought Canada's midfield, for how light it is, did really well, and there was a lot of names that impressed. To start, of course, Ali Ahmed ended up being one of the big names by the end of the term. We didn't see much of him at the start, but he really impressed with his cameos off the bench and was enough to earn a start where he's shown and he's got a bright future. Otherwise, Ismail Kone, he started slow, but I thought his recovery showed why Marseille invested a lot of money and why he's a world-class talent that's going to be the heart of this midfield for a decade, it feels like, for Canada. Otherwise, Jonathan Osorio heading into this tournament, was hard to know where he fits under Marsch. Turns out he's still got a big role to play as a savvy veteran, one of Canada's only true number 10 options. He looks like he's going to be continuing to play a big role for Canada. And lastly, that leaves Mathieu Chouanière, who, again, we didn't see much of at the beginning, but by the end, he really impressed a lot of people with his play. Otherwise, it was just two stock holds. There was no one going down really in midfield. Samuel Piet didn't play. He just remains a key veteran voice. And Stefan Eustáquio, he had some good moments. He also had some moments where you could tell he's not playing as much. His stock holds. So Josh, over to you for the forwards.
For the forwards, there's a similar trend with the first two players I'm going to touch on, and it's the fact they're both coming off of kind of difficult seasons for different reasons. The first one is Tajon Buchanan, who I have his stock going down. He played 59 minutes, followed by 24, followed by 14. He's kind of been in and out of the starting role for Canada of late. And I kind of put that back to the fact that, he got this big move to Inter Milan, which I absolutely wanted him to see, but he barely featured for them. He doesn't look like he's completely match fit. And unfortunately for him, he obviously picked up that big injury. Pretty tough tournament for Buchanan. Unfortunately, I hate to do it, but he does get a trending downward. The other player on this list that is getting a stock down is Kyle Larin. I know it kind of seems harsh, but I hold Kyle Larin to high regards. He's this program's all-time leading goal scorer. He had plenty of opportunities to put the ball in the back of the net. He didn't take them. That is his job. I know that he's been important to what Jesse Marsch wants to do off the ball, and I give him a lot of credit because I didn't know if he was able to adapt his game to suit Jesse's style. And I've been very impressed to see what he's been able to do. But like I said, at the end of the day, he's a striker. He's a good striker. I know he can put the ball in the back of the net. And the season he came off of with Mallorca just screams like a striker who just can't really finish right now. His confidence is not high. And leaving this tournament, I can't give him anything else but a stock down. We then move on to Jonathan David, who did score 2 goals, and thankfully he did, because I was debating whether to give him a stock down because he too missed a ton of chances for a striker with his quality. Raises some concerns, but he did score 2 goals. He's excellent off the ball, in my opinion. Like I've said many times, one of the best pressing strikers you're going to see. So I'm going to put him as the same. I don't really think those 2 goals made his stock go up too high, but I don't think that his stock went down. Theo Bair is going to remain the same because he did not feature in this competition. Jason Russell-Rowe had 5 minutes off the bench. I'm going to leave his stock the same as well. Liam Miller is an interesting one. I know he's taken some heat from the fan base, but I'm going to give Liam Miller the same. I think that he did a lot of good work in this tournament. I like the fact that, Jesse Marsch gave him the opportunity to start the tournament off against Argentina with Davies. I thought those two complemented each other really well. I love how direct he is. I love that he makes defenders think to create space for Davies with overlaps or underlapping runs. He's excellent off the ball. He's a pressing machine as well. Did he do a little bit too much at times? Yes, but I would never blame the player for that. He had a couple opportunities where he made the wrong decision, but overall, I was relatively happy with Liam Miller's game. I think that Schaffelberg is going to push him and probably get that starting role. But I think going into this, Liam Miller was a player that was already on the outside looking in, and I feel like he's right around that potential starting spot. So I'm going to put him as the same. The final 2 are stock ups. It's Tani Oluwaseyi, who was a player I did not believe was going to even really make this team before the friendlies when he was called in late, and he's the next man up. After Jonathan David, Kyle Larin, he's the 3rd striker, and he proved that. Jesse Marsch has faith in him, and he brought something completely different. He's a nice profile. I think Jesse will enjoy using him in the future. I was close to maybe putting him the same because he had a ton of opportunities to put the ball in the back of that as well. And you can kind of see he didn't quite rise to the occasion, but I did see a lot of good things. I'm happy with it. And there's no way his stock went anywhere else considering the amount of minutes he did get in this competition. The final player we're going to touch on is Jacob Schaffelberg, whose stock potentially rose the most throughout this tournament. Liam Miller was the starting left mid, but Jacob Schaffelberg absolutely took that on. He was electric every time he was on the pitch, whether he started, whether he came off the bench. He scored a goal, he picked up an assist, and he was just entertaining. And I think that he could be a player that could be in for a very intriguing summer, which, Alex, that is where we're going on next, because we're going to come up with some players that we think are going to set themselves up for a potential move. Not necessarily that these players will get moves, but players that could be in for a move because of this tournament. And we're going to begin at the back with Alistair Johnston, who I really do believe could be in for a move in the next few years. I don't know if he's really going to get one this summer, but seeing the performances he put in, I would have him as a top 3 Canadian performer at this tournament. And I just think the natural next step to move on from a club like Celtic would be to go to the Premier League. And Alex, why don't you go through the club that we linked him to?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you because it feels like Alistair Johnston's built to play in the Premier League one day. So we sat down, and the club we went for was Ipswich Town, freshly promoted. Of course, they've got head coach Kevin McKenna made all the waves in the championship with how they played. They play a bit of a fluid style. But, Alistair Johnston is pretty good on the ball. He had some really good pass progression stats this Copa America. We know he can move the ball up the field, but he also is that kind of hard-nosed defender you need to play in a league like the Premier League. He's kind of got, a bit of that modern flair, but with a bit of a, hard nose, and turns out a hard head, as the Peruvian player who had tried to headbutt him turned out unfazed by it. So yeah, Alistair Johnston just feels like with how he's trending over the last few years, it feels like we're going to see him in the Premier League one day. And I'm curious if maybe a tournament like this accelerates that. He's got the right passport in the sense that he's got that Northern Irish passport to help him, facilitate a move, because that's always an obstacle with Canadian players is, the passport and FIFA rankings and all those different factors, international spots that come into play. And it helps that Celtic has always been a factory for developing talent. So the fact that Johnson has now had a good year and a half of winning trophies, winning the hearts of Celtic fans. Maybe if it's not this summer, it definitely feels like in the years to come with his age that Johnson could really do some damage in the Premier League.
I think so. And a player that is currently in the Premier League right now is Luc de Fougerolles. I would like to see him get a loan move, preferably to the Championship. I think de Fougerolles, who played 67 minutes in this tournament, it was exciting. I said multiple times, I don't believe that de Fougerolles will feature in this tournament. I feel like he was just brought in to be part of this camp, to know that, he's got a role to play in the future. Jesse to get a look at him. I was honestly shocked that he got the start in that third place match, putting this 18-year-old kid up against a top nation like this. And the thing that I liked about him the most throughout was that I thought he had a rough start. That early yellow, a couple mistakes here and there, but he showed his maturity and his mentality, being able to battle through it, to not be afraid to go into challenges on a yellow. And I thought he put in a pretty solid performance for an 18-year-old. I don't believe he will probably get a ton of minutes at Fulham, and I really think this is crucial. I think he's good enough on the ball. He's improving day to day. I'd love to see him go into I don't have a club for you guys, but just a nice mid to top level championship team where he comes in, he competes for a spot, and hopefully gets a ton of minutes, because I think he could develop even further as a player in a competitive league like the Championship, where even if he comes in and plays kind of half the season, it's a long 46-game season. If he can get 20 to 30 starts at that level, I think that will go a long way, where maybe the season after, when he's 19, with that kind of experience now under his belt, he could go back to Fulham and potentially push for a spot. We have another couple links coming here. Alex, I'll give you two back-to-back here because you've already touched on them. It's Derek Cornelius and Moise Bombito, who are both being linked to Ligue 1. A couple clubs there you have in mind?
Yeah, for sure. I think it'd be intriguing to see where those two end up, because it definitely feels like as we mentioned, their stock is flying up, and there's a lot of reason why. I mean, Moise Bombito, at this point, it just speaks for itself. You see the what he brings to the table, the size, the speed, the skills on the ball, the way he reads the game, his mentality. Seems like nothing seemed to phase him this tournament, be it, yellow cards, rough moments, penalties where he was getting frozen on the spot. He just stepped up to every occasion. Doesn't feel like he's going to be with the Colorado Rapids much longer. He's been linked to Olympique Lyonnais, so we're going to stick with Lyon. I think that would be a fun fit for him. But I think to amend that, I think a lot of clubs in Ligue 1 could use a Moise Bombito. He fits the profile of the league. There's a lot of spots opening up. Like, for example, a Lille Lenny Yaro looks set to leave. Maybe a guy like Bombito could go in there and play in that system. There's a lot of clubs. As for Derek Cornelius, his stock has rose a lot, and it's been great to see, because he's had to really grind to where it is. This hasn't been like some overnight success story. This is someone who was starting games for Canada in 2019, right? 2018. But then over the years, he kind of lost his spot, struggled to get in the squad. Then he was getting in the squad, but never playing. Meanwhile, he was going from Whitecaps to Greece, to Sweden, and he's just done so well to continue to climb and climb and climb. And he showed this Copa America how mature, what he's grown in his game. It was great to see. So for him, it feels like he's ready to take that next step soon. And I'd also love to see him go to Ligue 1. And I could see him like at a Lens. Lens has done a good job of finding some kind of undervalued gems. They've looked to unfamiliar leagues, like they've invested in MLS players, other leagues. A Canadian center back doing well in the Swedish league could probably get some good value on that. And I think you could really thrive in playing for a club like Lens. So, hey, it'd be quite cool to see Canada's two starting center backs from this Copa America potentially playing against each other in France.
For Derek Cornelius, I will now also throw in Lille, because you just mentioned it. Euro moves on. That left-sided center back could be a potential opening there for Derek Cornelius, and Lille are not afraid to sign Canadian players. So there's a potential option there. Next player we're moving on to, will be kind of quick on him. It's Alphonso Davies. There's nothing really to add. It's just the fact that if Davies moves on this summer, it will be to Real Madrid. I don't think this tournament really convinced Real Madrid to go for it, or convinced anything. I think it's just more of the same. I would personally like to see Davies move on to Real Madrid, because I just think it would be incredible having someone like Alphonso Davies at the biggest club in world football. I want to see it happen. I think that there's a chance. I don't actually know, but that is obviously the only club more than likely that I'll be interested in Davies this summer. Another player that is, I think is pretty interesting to focus on, even though there's not really a ton of rumors around it, is Stephen Eustáquio. This is the player that Canadians absolutely adore. It was amazing seeing him get that move to Porto. But Jesse Marsch just recently spoke about the fact and referenced Eustáquio that, yes, it's cool that you're playing for a big club like Porto, but you need to play. And this tournament just proved it doesn't always 100% matter where you play. We finished 4th at Copa America, and we had 13 MLS players on this roster. And a lot of the MLS players played a massive role for this Canadian team, Bombito and Schaffelberg being two big ones. So not necessarily meaning that Eustáquio needs to go to Major League Soccer, but a club that I think that would make sense. So I don't really think he's would want to leave Portugal. I don't think that in the big three, I don't think Sporting and Benfica would probably come knocking, or if they would make that type of move, but maybe like a Braga, a team that always pushes for the European spots, that plays in one of the leagues depending on where they finish in Europe this season. And of course, he'd probably be a starting role there. He'd be a starting every game kind of player. And I think that could be a really, really good move for Eustáquio if indeed he believes he needs to move on from Porto. Which then, the last player in our midfield is Mathieu Choinière, Alex. And who do we link him to?
Yeah, Mathieu Choinière is an intriguing one. Of course, we have to remember that publicly he asked for a trade ahead of this tournament from CF Montreal, which indicates he wants to move within MLS. But then he made some very interesting comments. Of course, as mentioned, Jesse Marsch recently spoke in Montreal, where he talked about Eustáquio, like you mentioned, Josh. Mathieu Choinière also spoke on that day. He said some interesting things, mentioning that for him, his dream has always been to go to Europe, that he wants to play in the Champions League, push at that highest level. Interestingly enough, of course, Jesse Marsch was then asked about Choinière as, the Montreal guy, and he said, hey, look, I'm all for him pushing to Europe, but as he mentioned, minutes, all that matters. So it's interesting. We tried to find some clubs where could Mathieu Choinière, he's a bit older in the sense that he's mid-20s, might be tougher for him to make that jump right away to a top club. We thought that Belgium would make a lot of sense. There's also the language connection, which will help for a guy like Choinière to come in. Of course, they speak many languages in Belgium, but it helps that they speak French. And we decided to go for a bit of a Canadian connection. It's been a while, so some might have forgotten. But back in once upon a time, Jonathan David was ripping it up for Ghent, scoring goals for fun. We had a look. Their midfield is quite light. They don't mind signing a bit of guys in their mid-20s to go along with younger guys. They've got a history of developing talent. I feel like a Choinière would be a nice mix where he's got upside. He's got a lot to learn. He could be moved on maybe. He has a couple of good years, but he also brings a bit of experience, right? This is a guy who's had to battle to be, a star piece on his hometown team, making 2 all-star games. Like, it's such a great story. I think going to a club like Ghent could be a great spot for him to battle. And who knows, maybe either he stays at Ghent, that's not a bad thing, or maybe in the future there's room for him to even move further upward.
Moving on to the forwards, we have Jonathan David, who has been linked to plenty of clubs in the Premier League. And there's actually a report coming out at the time of recording from Ben Jacobs that says Jonathan David is one of the forwards under consideration by Postecoglou. Lille will be looking for around 25 million euros, but there is interest from other Premier League sides like Chelsea, West Ham United, and Newcastle United. I think Tottenham would be a perfect fit for Jonathan David. I have been saying it for well over a year. Postecoglou plays such a beautiful brand of football that I think Jonathan David would fit perfectly. The way that he can press, he can link up as well. There's also the fact that Richarlison will potentially move on. There's rumors linking him to Saudi. So if it's Brennan Johnson, Jonathan David fighting for that starting role, which would be important because I don't want to see him go to the Prem and sit on the bench, I would back David in that battle. And I think that there's a good shot that he could start in the Premier League, the best league in the world, with one of the top teams in that. So I think that would be a great move for him. Another player that could be in for a move is Liam Miller. Now, Liam had, like I said, there's a lot of good moments in this tournament for Liam. I think that there's a move coming for him. He's still property right now of Basel. I believe he wants to go back to England. And there's the last club we kind of heard of was Sheffield United. And I do like that fit for him. Liam's made it very clear he wants to play as a winger, not a wing back. That is not what he wanted to do at Preston North End this past season, although he did it because he's professional and I thought he had an excellent season. But Sheffield United will be one of those teams coming down to the championship that will be expected to push for promotion. So if he can get a move to a top club in the championship, get a ton of minutes, be a starter in a role that he wants to do as a winger, I think that's a really good move for him. And if they're able to get promotion all of a sudden in a year or so, he's back in the Premier League, which leaves our final player for today, Alex. And we left the best for last, I'd say, just in terms of the performance at Copa America. I want to give his flowers to him because he absolutely deserves it. It's Jacob Schaffelberg. There's a club that we've been joking about a little bit, Alex, but I do really think it makes sense.
Yeah, let's lean into it. Let's make it happen. For us, Josh and I decided to go with PSV Eindhoven. And you know what? There's a lot that makes sense. They've obviously got Ernie Stewart there, an American, and he's brought in a lot of Americans. He's also had some CONCACAF flavor. He had, Chucky Lozano there. Chucky Lozano just left. Chucky Lozano is a winger. Maybe he's not to put 2 and 2 together and find 4, but I think that's what's happening there. And I think Jacob Schaffelberg for him, the next step would be a league like the Eredivisie, because I think you've seen in MLS, he's obviously got incredible physical tools. You saw at this Copa America too. He can run super fast. He can be direct, dangerous. For him, the next steps are just technical. Okay, he can shoot the ball well. He can cross the ball well. How do you take that to a next level? How do you take that so that you can be a bit more involved in possession? All those little things that you learn in a very technical league like the Eredivisie, I think he'd really thrive, because his combination of physical tools would really help him, and then you can continue to upgrade his game. And I think a club like PSV, where they're pushing for titles, but they're also willing to give North American talent a shot. I mean, it kind of seems like a no-brainer, right? So we're going to go all in on this train, and if it does happen, you can remember that you heard it here first on the One Soccer YouTube channel. Remember that. And that is all the time we have on today's episode. Let us know what you guys think down in the comment section on our stock up, stock down, as well as the transfers. And as always, if you guys enjoyed the episode, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub. We'll see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.